Today I am working with some of those green tomatoes that I picked, and I'm going to make a roasted salsa verde with them. This can be done with tomatillas. I don't have tomatillas growing in my garden this year, but I do have some green tomatoes, and I was going to go pull some plants that had a few left on there, and I just decided to pull those and go ahead and make this roasted salsa. This is not my personal recipe. This is from the Ball Book of Canning, 2016 updated version. And they have lots of good stuff in there, by the way. You should check it out. You can look on their website for some of them as well. Um, I generally don't mess with recipes for canning that have been published because they've been tested, and it's really important to get the acidity right so that you don't get strange things happening in your processed foods and you don't end up with unpleasant effects, if you know what I mean. So I am only going to make a couple of teeny little modifications. First off, I'm having the recipe because I don't have 4 pounds of green tomatoes. I only have about 2 pounds. Secondly, I'm going to decrease the onion just a little bit because this is a fairly large onion and it calls for a medium onion. And I'm going to up the number of chili peppers that I'm putting in this recipe because I want mine to be a little bit spicier. So let's go ahead and get started with this. This is going to be sort of a 2-step process. The first process is to roast everything together. The second is just to put it in a saucepan, cook it, and then can it. And I'll show you each of those steps along the way. All right, this is a pretty straightforward recipe. You don't need a whole lot to do it. All right, to make this recipe, as I said, I'm having it from what the published recipe is. This is about just a hair over 2 pounds of green tomatoes. I've been washed and freshly picked. I have 1 onion. I have 4 serrano peppers, 4 little garlic cloves, some fresh cilantro. This is very important. You need to add acidity, and this is lime juice that is going to be added in. And pepper and salt. Why do you use bottled lime juice, not fresh lime juice? It's because of the consistency and the assuredness of the level of acidity in the bottled product. The fresh limes can vary, just like fresh fruits and fresh vegetables can have a variety of acidity levels. So using the bottled juice is really important. Same as if you were canning tomatoes or something like that, you add bottled lemon juice to that. All right. Step 1 is very simple. We're just going to cut these tomatoes in halves and quarters and put them on a lined baking sheet. So let's go ahead and get that done. Just having these, quartering the bigger ones. They're very pretty on the inside. You know, the only recipe I ever really knew about for green tomatoes was fried green tomatoes. And in all honesty, I'm not in love with fried green tomatoes. But a couple of years ago, I had a pile of green tomatoes left right before the frost, as I had a massive tomato patch that year. And I harvested them because they were calling for a heavy freeze, and I didn't want them to freeze. Plus, it was getting very late in the year, and I knew that they weren't going to ripen up. So I harvested them, and I ended up with something like 35 pounds of green tomatoes. Oh my gosh, what was I going to do with 35 pounds of green tomatoes? So I started researching a little bit and fooling around in the kitchen, as I often do. And I made all sorts of things. I made, obviously, a lot of green salsa in a lot of different variations and shapes and forms. I also made green chili. I made green tomato soup, which was surprisingly good. It was kind of like tomatillo soup. Golly, you can actually do a lot of things with green tomatoes. Oh, but my very favorite thing to do with those green tomatoes that year and every year is to make pickles out of them. If you get one like this, it's a little bit squishy, just don't use it. This one's a little squishy too. We're just going to go ahead and quarter this onion. I'm going to use just 3/4 of this onion. Just slice it into hunks like this. Put it on the pan. Now notice I'm not using oil because you don't want oil in your salsa. This is not something you want. Oil, if you were putting oil in, I think you would want to be able to pressure can this to have it be safe. Just going to take the peeling off of the garlics. Finally, we'll just take these peppers and put them right on the pan for roasting alongside. I'm actually going to move some of the tomatoes from the other pan onto this pan because that'll make them less crowded and more likely to roast nicely. The oven has been preset at 425. We're going to put those in the oven and we're going to set the timer for 15 minutes. When those 15 minutes are up, go ahead and remove the garlic. Put it in the saucepan. I'm also going to remove these smaller, tiny tomatoes because I think they're cooked enough as well too. I'm going to leave everything else in there for about another 10 minutes. While the tomatoes are roasting, go ahead and put your cleaned jars into your hot water and you're going to let them just simmer for about those 15 minutes. I'm just going to take some of these cilantro leaves and chop them up. This I'll be throwing into the salsa just before I'm ready to can it. Once the peppers and everything is roasted, I'm just going to remove them and put them into the saucepan. Now, I'm going to add the other ingredients in. First thing I'm going to do is add some lime juice, a little over 1/4 cup. There's the lime juice going in. 1 teaspoonful of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. It's okay to mess with the spice ratios in canning recipes because that's not really impacting the acidity. Now you have a couple of choices. I'm going to be using my immersion blender just to chunk this up. You can also put it in a food processor or just a regular blender before you go. But I'm just going to kind of chop this up a little bit. Now I want mine to be a little bit thinner. So I'm going to add a little bit of water and a little bit more lime juice. Now we're just going to bring this up to heat, to a simmer. Meanwhile, I'm going to get my jars all set up for canning. All right, let's just take a little look at the equipment that we're using. This is a jar puller, and it is for lifting your hot jars. I use this to really help me not splatter around. You don't have to have this filling cup. I have some white vinegar and a towel that I'm going to use to wipe the rim of the jars to keep them clean. I have washed my lids and my rims, and so they are all ready. It used to be that they recommended boiling these. They no longer say that that's necessary. Right? At this point, you're going to work really quickly. You can put your filler here. You're going to scoop out your product, hot product. You're going to fill the jar just to about 1/2 inch below the rim. Then you're going to take your towel and you're going to wipe that rim off really well to make sure there's nothing between the seal and the jar. You put your rim on the jar. I need to have something hot here. Careful not to burn yourself, which I'm about to do. I need to have a towel. All right, then you just pop it right back into the canner. All right, just keep repeating that process until all your jars are full. If you have leftovers but not enough for a whole jar, just stick it in the fridge. And then you'll have some salsa. This can be eaten right away, but I would let it sit for a few days just to really let that settle, the flavors meld. Why do you want to have headspace, what's called headspace? Well, this is going to expand during cooking, and you don't want it to push the lid off. All right, the jars are in the canner, and the canner is just about at the boiling point. And we will, once that comes to the boiling point, we'll turn on the timer for 20 minutes. Thanks so much for joining me on the porch for a bit more cooking today to make this roasted green tomato salsa. Take care. Bye.